Hey guys, Garrett here. As promised, I am offering here the full and extended conversation that I had with Stephanie Matthews, who was featured on Opus 53 of the Triloquy podcast. Be sure to check out all of the really phenomenal work she's doing, and be sure to continue to support Black business, Black art, and Black freedom. Here's my conversation with Miss Stephanie Matthews. Maybe 2.5, 2 months ago, my boyfriend and I were kind of just talking about the pandemic, and I kind of thought of the idea of protest just randomly, and we got into the conversation of the coronavirus being seen as the principal threat to so many communities. But what if that was not the case? And I think as we've seen, that hasn't been the case for so many. Coronavirus didn't kill Breonna Taylor, George Floyd,
No.
Ahmaud Arbery. What's your take on that concept? Because a lot of people are, still concerned about the coronavirus, as we should be. But the reality is change needs to happen at the same time. And that change requires a bit of protest and physical contact in many cases.
Well, I'm a large supporter of peaceful protest. I want to go on record in saying that because I mean, it is also my belief that uh the desired end result can come about a number of ways. There's not a singular, clearly paved pathway to achieve what we've been fighting for pretty much our entire existence in this country. So, while I am a proponent of and supporter of peaceful protest, I admire these young people who have the energy, who have the fire, who have the fight to be out here um shaking things up. I mean, when we talk about the first captive Africans, you know, arriving in the Americas as early as like 1526, I'm definitely challenging the 1619 narrative of arrival. Um look at where we are today. We are literally having the same conversations, fighting the same fights that our great 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 grandparents were dealing with. So the fact that not much has changed, um, I'm actually kind of shocked that so many Americans have been so blinded by their own implicit bias and the systemic racism that is so deeply rooted in the DNA of this country to have only been awakened. This
Right.
notion of like this new awakening is baffling to me. It really is baffling to watch. But the reality is, there are people who really truly haven't seen it the way that we've seen it.
And it's baffling to me as well. I don't know how much attention you pay to Facebook, but I had to go off a little bit earlier this week because it all just came to a head. I just sat, one morning and just realized the fact that what has been obvious to so many of us for our entire professional lives, if not our entire lives, period, people are kind of just waking up to all of a sudden. I mean, it makes you question some of the conversations you've had with these people and some of the work you've done with them and everything in between.
I In some cases, yes, but in most cases, no. I think that privilege is such an intrinsic gift that white Americans have been born with in this country as white Americans. And um, obviously, the notion that you could discriminate against another human being because of the amount of melanin in their skin is just an absurd notion to begin with. But that's what we're dealing with. Okay. We're dealing with something that is superficial. Even the construct of, this this kind of like race based identification is kind of a newer construct that was meant specifically to benefit the transatlantic slave trade,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we can't until we can really just say we're American, full stop. Oh, I'm French. I'm Indian. I'm Chinese. I'm Japanese. Like we don't in the Americas, that's not an end all be all, right? So I mean, it's when you look at even like apartheid, when there's this like separation by the color of your skin, the texture of your hair. I mean, it's just it's just absurd. It
Yeah.
really is. Um, but that's where we are here. That's what this country has been founded on. Um, and so I think that there are a lot of well intentioned, um, even well educated people whose privilege has blinded them from the suffering of someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that concept of just being, American is something that I couldn't really wrap my mind around until the first time I traveled abroad. I went to another
Right,
country and just being seen and referred to as American, and that's it was a
right.
little different for me. The same for the music. And with that in mind, I kind of want to transition into Black Music Appreciation Month.
Yeah.
And many places around the world, the music that we call Black music here in the United States, there is just called American music. Do you think that same concept, that same conversation rolls over or should roll over?
I mean, okay. The sad reality is that without designating a time to celebrate the work of Black people in America, to celebrate their efforts and legacy, um, it would be and has historically been eclipsed by the achievements of the narrators who
Mm,
have historically and typically been white people. Um, and honestly, it should be no surprise, obviously, that the shortest month of the calendar year is
sure.
dedicated to ta-da, Black History Month. But I do believe that we should celebrate the achievements of all of the people who make this country so magnificently diverse. Um, but since our beloved America is not at the stage where
Right.
we can automatically expect equity, then yes, I side with President Carter and President Obama, who also felt it imperative to set aside a time to acknowledge, the contributions of Black musicians and artists and to celebrate Black music. I mean, so Barack Obama basically proclaimed that Black music and Black musicians have helped the country to, quote, dance to express our faith through song, to march against injustice, and to defend our country's enduring promise of freedom and opportunity for all. End quote. I mean, we're clearly not there yet as a country,
Right. Right.
but Black music continues to challenge us to pursue freedom and opportunity. Um, and so, yeah,
And
a short answer, absolutely. I think it is appropriate to celebrate.
And and
Um,
and and I think in a similar way that, in a similar way that Black music, the concept of Black music challenges certain things, I think, your career has been a testament of challenging what people may even think of as Black music. I mean, when you opened, that violin case for the very first time years
mhm.
ago, could you have ever imagined? Did you see yourself on stage with, Mary J. Blige, Travis Scott, all the people you've worked with, Lizzo?
um, I mean, no, definitely not. My roots are in classical music. I mean, like my mom prefers gospel music to any other type of music on any given day, and
Mhm.
my dad prefers to listen to classical music on any given day. I could easily say that those two styles of music largely contributed to my desire to pursue music professionally. So I honestly didn't listen to a lot of what would be considered secular music until I was a little older.
Oh, wow.
Um, my mom is very conservatively Christian. Um, my dad maybe a little less so, but still quite conservative. So, I did start listening to instrumental jazz as I got older. Vocal jazz and lyrics were a little too secular for my mom's liking
Mhm.
at the time.
Yeah.
And then obviously, like when I was, when I had my own room and I was feeling myself and, middle school, high school, had my little, radio. I had my, my two fingers locked and loaded to hit the play record combo so
Sure.
I could make my, make my little mixtapes and, so I, I, I don't know that it ever really crossed my mind as a young violinist that I would be on stage playing with pop artists.
Mhm.
While these are they were always like these larger than life figures and I admired them very much. It never really crossed my mind. Maybe because I just didn't know how that would work, how it would look,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. I just can't help but to, think about a reality in which, those Suzuki string players or those beginning band kids could open up that case for the first time and see something like that, see more realities than be in an orchestra or be a music teacher because that's all it's been. I mean, that's all it seemed like for me when I started, I'm gonna be
Right.
a band teacher or maybe I'll, be in an orchestra. But I mean the possibilities are so much more than that. But it seems like we just kind of we're still fighting that siphoning of so-called classical music, instrumental education into one thing that's again dominated by whiteness and systemic issues.
Agreed. But I think I mean that comes down to visibility, right? Visibility is power. So, I mean, how is a child going to aspire to do something, to achieve something that they've never seen before? Um and maybe they'll have a dream, you know what I mean, and it'll come to them through seeing something on TV or something like a little more indirect. But the reality is, when we talk, I mean, I've taught in public schools, and when when I speak to, or when in the past when I had had conversations with you know little black boys and little black girls. Obviously, I taught all, all all ethnic groups, all nationalities,
Sure,
but
sure.
I'm speaking to them specifically as it pertains to black musicians, black art, right? They aspire to do things that they had seen before, whether it be, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a doctor, my dad was a police officer, I want to be a police officer, I want to be a basketball player, I want to be a football player, um I want to be a singer.
Mhm.
I think that these are things that saw they saw themselves reflected in professionals that held those positions and could say, "Oh, I could do that too." I mean, and the beauty of now is we have so many more talented black artists who are coming to the forefront um in various fields. But in classical music now, we're seeing far more black men and women, um and LGBTQ,
Right.
thankfully it's
Right.
more than time,
Yeah.
um who are kind of having the visibility that for so long had been kind of overshadowed by the status quo. So I think we have far more work to do in that regard. But I mean, imagine if your teacher was you, Garrett.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine being in school. Like, I think about that sometimes. Like, if I was in a classroom, you know, and my teacher was a Stephanie Matthews
Mhm.
who, was a classically trained musician, went to some of the top schools that I aspired to attend and to go to, and could speak to things like arranging, could speak to things like contracting, could speak to things like having a thriving career in, mainstream music, touring,
Absolutely.
what
Yeah.
that looks like, being in chamber ensembles and being able to kind of like straddle both lines, or to straddle the line. It would have changed my, I think it definitely would have changed my perspective, for
Absolutely.
sure.
When was when would you say was the turning point in your career? When did you start to get into an area that you didn't initially see?
um Honestly, it was around college. So I was at Indiana University, and I just remember starting to feel very burnt out.
Hmm.
Um, I started my undergraduate career in biochemistry, um, and then made the switch like after about 2 years. So
Oh wow, you were
I
invested.
I completed 3 semesters in a scholarship program. I was on scholarship, and decided to switch over to pursuing music full time at that point. That doesn't mean that I just became invested at
Sure,
that point, but
sure.
because I was competitive prior to that, and participated in a lot of like local and regional competitions, etc. But the notion of being a struggling musician scared me. I'm being completely honest with you. I did not want that to be my lot. I was like, I want to be able to support myself. I personally did not know um I didn't really know any black classical violinists
Mhm.
that I could look to that had the career that seemingly I was being prepared for,
Back to that point of visibility.
Visibility is so powerful, okay? Misty Copeland is not the only black ballerina. She's certainly not the first, and she
Right,
won't be the last.
right.
But the fact that she is a household name is a powerful thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Because like everybody's not going to be able to travel the world and catch these glimpses of these incredible forces of nature, you know and may never set foot in to see a ballet. Like I know plenty people who have never gone to see a ballet, which I think is shameful, but again, um Misty has a platform, and it gives little black girls dreams of being able to see themselves
Yeah.
as a professional ballerina.
And how ubiquitous she's become. Earlier this afternoon,
Absolutely.
I was, just on Saturdays, I like to just go through my music videos. It brings me back to my childhood, just letting them go. And Misty Copeland is in the Drake "Nice for What" video.
Yep.
So
Yep.
even all the way on that in that corner
And
of the
she worked with
arts.
Prince as well. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's funny when I look at someone like Misty Copeland, which is so it really interestingly enough, I was fortunate enough to perform in a quartet for her wedding
Oh
out
wow.
out here, yeah. And but like I look at someone like Misty Copeland, and obviously she is in a very, very historically white dominated space, and she is forced to navigate that with varying attacks on her femininity, attacks on her body, um bogus bogus narratives about you know which body type, you know or which race of people would make the best
Mhm.
ballerinas. I mean, all kinds of ridiculous things, but I think she's very poised and very graceful in how she addresses a lot of these a lot of these negative comments and attacks. And honestly, I think a lot of us, if we've gone through some of the more traditional channels of education have experienced that to some degree. I mean, not even talking about entering the professional space, Lord
Right.
forbid, but
Right. Yeah. Even in the
um
educational space.
oh, that's a whole other conversation. That's a rabbit hole in and of itself.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, I really I admire her, and when I look at her quote unquote crossover appeal and
Hmm.
how she's obviously very firmly rooted in, you know, classical and traditional ballet. She is an American dancer, and her style, the stylistic elements that she brings to the stage is is uniquely American. And she's been able to cross over into, you know, more mainstream formats and collaborating with, you know, these big celebrity artists. And I feel like in some ways my career has mirrored that on the music side a
Hmm.
little bit, in that I have roots in classical music. Undoubtedly, the sensibility is there. The my first love came from, you know, my love of the violin and my desire to want to pursue, you know, a career in music as a violinist stemmed from my love for classical music. So, um, being able to translate that into a more mainstream context and have these kinds of opportunities is unique, I think. Um, like we were talking about, I'm sorry, this is like a very kind of like round robin way of
Oh no, you're
addressing
fine.
this,
You're
but
fine.
when you had asked me about my initial, I guess, plunge into more mainstream territory, was post Sphinx competition. I was in Detroit, um, with my friend Shelby Latin, now Shelby Harris. Her mom drove us up to Detroit. We were both at IU at the time, and the gala had finished. We were getting ready to head back on the road, and we were driving past Fox Theater in Detroit, and we saw that Erykah Badu was headlining and Floetry was also on the ticket, and we begged her mom to allow us to go. And you know, so I guess she figured she'd pull over, take a quick nap in the car, let us, you know, do our thing, and then keep it moving. And we had the brilliant idea. You know the story, but you know, for the sake of the listeners,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, you know, we had the brilliant idea, since we were dressed in our formal black, like, oh, let's see if we could sneak backstage. We had our
I would have I
instruments.
would have never gone there, but y'all went directly to that thought.
Yeah, I don't know what, I don't know why. I mean, I really couldn't tell you why, because I don't think I've snuck into a concert since then, like at all. I mean, obviously, like as a musician, I know other musicians, so it's, you know,
Right.
it's not
Right.
like you don't have to sneak in, but yeah, apparently we thought that was a good idea at the time, and we were able to see the schedule, which showed that they were going to be in Indianapolis the very next night.
Hmm.
So we ended up, you know, we ended up buying tickets anyway. They kicked us out from backstage. Clearly, they were like, definitely not. And so we did watch the show from the audience, and then the next show, I think it might have been like 2 days later, at the Murat Theater. We made up in our mind we were gonna go. I don't remember. I think we had planned to leave like right after orchestra. Orchestra was like the last class of the day.
Hmm.
So I made a few copies of my audition CD for grad school, because that's all I had. I was like, we got to have samples of work. So
Yeah.
I brought 6 of them. Um and so I basically gave 3 to Shelby and was like, just give them these. They won't know. They
Right.
won't
Right.
know, cuz you know the difference. So yeah, so she had 3, I had 3. We were ready to lock and load. Drove up on my last $10. I mean, Garrett, my last $10. Do you understand what I say?
Wow. Wow.
The $10 went in my tank, and that was
And that was
barely
it.
enough to get us to Indianapolis and back to Bloomington round trip. So when I get there and see that parking was like, who knows, $5, $10, I don't remember how much it was. I couldn't afford it. Neither of us could afford it. So I parked way at the back, kind of like where the tour buses were, locked my wheel hard to the right because I was like, if they tow me, then they'll have to wait till all the cars are gone so that my
Sure,
car doesn't
sure.
hit the next car. And I was just like praying, like, please do not let me get towed because I won't have money to get it out. But anyways, because we were back by the tour buses, we saw Erica and Floetry's bus along with their band. So like we were just kind of sitting out on the curb. We had no money to pay for tickets. We were just hoping we would get a chance to meet them. She walks out. Erica at the time was pregnant with Puma. She's like, "What are you guys doing sitting outside? The show's inside." We're like,
Wow.
"Well, we're college kids. We can't afford it. We love you, but we can't, we'd love to see the show, but we don't have money. We were just hoping we'd get a chance to meet you." She got her tour manager to give us VIP wristbands. So we're
Whoa.
like in the front in the VIP section. And then like right before the end of the show, we rushed back, towards the buses because I was like, I want to keep an eye on my car and
Yeah,
make sure
yeah.
I don't get towed, and also hopefully, get a chance to say thank you. And that's when we bumped into PJ Morton, and by this time I had already given some samples, like the recordings to. I gave one to Natalie, the girl from Floetry. I had met Marsha in Detroit. I distinctly remember meeting Marsha in Detroit, but I met Natalie when we were in Indianapolis. And
Mhm.
then the rest I gave to Erica. And she was like, yeah, we don't have, I'd love to have strings in my band, but she was like, we kind of already have our band set up, but,
Mhm.
I'd love to take a listen to your stuff. Then PJ, who was playing auxiliary keys, and I think he was singing background vocals at the time with Erica, was like, weren't y'all the girls that were in Detroit? He was like, are y'all roadies or something? I'm like, no, we're not roadies. But, I was like, where are you? So we saw you were going to be in Indianapolis. We wanted to catch the show. So we're talking, making small talk, talked about how, we were both violinists. He was like, oh, well, do you write? And I'm like, yeah. I mean,
Did you though?
I was very good with counterpoint. I mean, I know that I had a strong ear.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and we had all kinds of like composition projects that I did very well, did very well with in
Okay.
school. And so that was my initial reaction, like, oh yeah, I write. Not thinking like, do you arrange strings? You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? I didn't
Yeah.
even know string arranging was a thing at that point. Music school educated me did not know that music arranging was a thing. Okay, because
Yeah.
it wasn't something that was talked about in that way. I mean, being a composer is one thing, right? But
An
like orchestra,
arranger.
yeah, it's a very unique thing. I didn't even know that it was something that people professionally do. So when he said right, I was like, oh yeah, I've done composition projects. And he's like, well, I'm working on my debut album. I really want strings. I didn't have any more CDs to hand out, so he gave me a PO box that I could send my stuff to, and he was like, I love your stuff. Let's do it." And so he flew me, my friend Shelby and Shelby's sister Coley, who played cello, flew us down to Atlanta, and that's when we recorded the Emotions album, and that shot PJ, I think I could I could single him out in saying that he definitely gave me like my first opportunity in like getting my foot in the door when it came to like navigating the more mainstream space, because after his emotion the work that we did on the Emotions album got the attention of then up and coming music director Adam Blackstone. And Adam had just gotten the placement with Kanye West for then his upcoming Glow in the Dark tour. And he was
Mm.
looking for someone to go on the road as lead strings. Now, mind you, I'm in East Harlem, like in my raggedy little apartment, teaching kids, you know, for like $15 an hour. And I get a call and he's like, yeah, yeah, I met you in, I think it might have been Nashville. I'd done a couple of spot dates with PJ at that point. And he was like, yeah, I loved what you did on the emotions record. And I want to get, I want to have someone come out who can write, quickly, and someone who could be lead strings, because we're gonna, we'll probably have a string section. So I'm just like, okay. He says Kanye West. I'm like, the name sounds familiar, but I didn't even know who Kanye West was
That's
like that.
incredible. Wow.
My And so when I told my sister, I was like, yeah, it's like an artist. I think he says like Kanye something. She said, Kanye West. She said, girl, you better go. Literally. And so I had to look him up because I didn't really listen to, I mean, the hip hop that I knew and that I listened to was like Nas. I knew a little bit of Common.
Hmm.
Um, I'm trying to think if there is like maybe like KRS-One, like
Sure.
just
The,
like
the the
little,
classic. The
yeah.
classics. Yeah.
But I wasn't like a hip hop head, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just really didn't know. And I remember that was kind of around the time Kanye was doing these college tours, and he had done a show at my sister's school. And she was like, you should go. You need to go. You need to go. So I looked him up and I'm like, man, this could be cool. But really, they would want like a classical violinist to go on the road with them. And so, he was like, I'll have the tour manager reach out to you. At this point, I was just like, it seemed like such a far-fetched notion. And when I got the call and they gave me the dates, they were going to fly me out 48 hours later to LA for production rehearsals, I had to call all my schools and all my principals and let them know that I was going to be gone for the rest of the school year.
That must have been tough. Or maybe it wasn't.
It was strange because half of them didn't believe me. They just thought I wanted to quit.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it was definitely, I was in shock. No doubt about it. I was definitely in shock. But that was the pivot point for sure. It started with PJ, and then kind of like developing that relationship with Adam Blackstone has definitely like set me on, I think, the current career path that I'm on now.
And that the way that your career has just evolved has always reminded me of the path to freedom. I've described your career as freedom. You're not punching into anyone's clock. You didn't have to worry about furlough or unemployment in light of the coronavirus. There were just certain freedoms that you had, and as we
Certain freedoms,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask. As we're coming up here on Juneteenth, and we're
Yeah.
thinking about that word freedom. Is that a word that you would use to describe yourself or your career? Do you feel free?
Um, in some ways, yes, but in some ways, no. Ultimately, no. But do I feel a sense of freedom in my career? Yes. And I would say yes because, um, I think I had hit a level of frustration within the traditional classical schematic.
Hmm.
And, it started, while I was a student in school, and just the reception that I had from certain teachers, not all of my teachers, but I mean, I had some pretty incredible teachers, thank God. But I also had some pretty awful teachers.
Sure.
And so it just felt like I had to keep asking myself, like, what am I fighting so hard for? It just felt like um it it honestly felt like there were people in place to strategically deter me from pursuing a career in classical music. It literally felt like it was like their job to ensure that, it's almost like I know people voice this kind of after the fact, but it really felt like there were people there to break my spirit,
Yeah.
like intentionally. And I consider myself to be pretty thick-skinned. I'm um not saying that like I'm completely unbothered, because I think everyone has, their threshold of what they can endure, but uh it it felt particularly challenging. I mean, not saying that I wasn't up for the challenge, but I had to continue asking myself, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? To graduate, with loads of student loan debt, by the way.
Oh, don't get me
Um,
started.
yeah. And then, to see my colleagues, people who I had been, you know, we had competed
Yeah. Yeah.
together.
Mhm.
And in some cases, not all, but in some cases where, you know, I would, I would win, or I would place higher than they would. And then when we get to like a more professional, when we enter the professional space, it's like some of us are just, stuck at the door, um and that was really frustrating. I did start a string quartet. We had some success, but even with that, I just felt like there were times where we would be overlooked for another group. And it just, I don't know why it felt so labored to even have people who wanted to help,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
where there would be, faculty, teachers, and people who would like jump at the bit to help another group get from point A to point B. And I'm not talking about we were just sitting back on our haunches like, "Hey, you should be helping us." I'm talking like I definitely remember like spending our money, scraping by like the little pennies literally that we
Right.
had
Right.
to like get photos done, and to like go get business cards printed on good business quality stock paper. So when people like reached out to us, people don't really use business cards in the same way anymore, but you know we had something to hand people, with our names on them. Stephanie Matthews had Stephanie Matthews cards for Ebony Strings Quartet, and Adiza Sanchez Rahim and Patrice Jackson and Naira Underwood. And um, I also remember being in school at the time. I was at Juilliard. I was pursuing my master's, and they didn't have enough. They didn't the whole goal was to have a student quartet.
Mhm.
And frankly, I was just tired of begging and pleading, um, with other students to want to be in a chamber ensemble. I was in a piano trio with two other friends of mine who are non-black, and we still do perform together. But I was like, I really really love string quartet repertoire, so I really really wanted to have a string quartet. And so there were literally like a handful of black students in the school at the time. I was the only black violinist in either undergrad or grad division at the school at the time. And so I had reached out to, well, I connected with Patrice Jackson, a cellist, and
Mhm. Yeah,
connected
shout
with
out to Patrice, yeah.
shout out to Patrice, and connected with Adiza Sanchez Rahim, who was an undergrad at the time. Patrice had done work prior to getting to Juilliard at Yale. So um, Patrice was the one who was like, you need to reach out to Naira Underwood. Like, she's in New York. She's a great violinist. I know she came through Sphinx, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, let's reach out to her. And that's, we had this like four young black women in a string quartet. And, we were like going all over the place trying to rehearse. Like, Naira lived in Brooklyn at the time. I was in Harlem at the time. So was Patrice. And I want to say Adiza might have been at the Bronx. So we were trying to figure out like where we would be able to rehearse, and
Yeah.
also space, because I had roommates. Most of us had roommates, if I'm not mistaken. I think Naira at the time may have lived on her own, but there were other student groups at the school who were using the facilities at the school. Now, we were tackling a lot of the new music, so we were collaborating with the young composers, because they were literally begging people to play their work. And a lot of people just didn't want to dedicate time, rehearsal time, to learning new work when they wanted to program more traditional repertoire, especially for the purpose of competing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we were like, well, let's do it. So that was like our whole approach, was new music from the very beginning. And we cultivated relationships with these composers, and it was astonishing to be told that we were not able to rehearse at the school. Literally, they said if all of the musicians in the quartet were not students at Juilliard, then we would not be able to use the facility. They didn't name our group specifically, but it was very targeted, because we had upcoming performances for like choreo comp and like Juilliard programs. So I got a tip internally that I shall not name,
Okay.
who made me aware that there were not enough cellists enrolled at Juilliard to be part of the quartet survey program, which I think is a first year program, and it's required of all incoming freshmen. So they had students coming from like Columbia to be a part of this program. So they technically weren't students at Juilliard either, but they were able to use the facility. And so this person suggested that I should hold them to that. So, and then they allowed us to use the facilities. But had we not had an ally
Yeah.
internally,
Yeah.
we would have been flailing. And there were so many moments like that, not just in school, but that like extended outside of school also. And I'm really thankful for platforms like Soulful Symphony. I remember as a student, having the opportunity to perform in Soulful Symphony and getting paid for it. There were many opportunities that I was presented with that were unpaid, for the exposure, which is
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah.
But,
That whole concept of being paid in exposure.
yeah, but like, and maybe that's nice to consider if you have the means to do free work. But at the time, like when I first of all, New York City is one of the most expensive cities
Oh
in the
yeah. Oh
country,
yeah.
and I couldn't even afford to live on campus. Living on a campus was very expensive. So I had to basically like find living arrangements that were more affordable. And I worked 3 part-time jobs while I was in school, which meant, by the way, that I had to literally look at my academic schedule and figure out which classes I could afford to miss so that I
Mm.
could work,
Oh my goodness.
and
Yeah, I
then
know
to be
those days.
offered exposure
Right. On top of that struggle.
is laughable. So it's just like, and then I think just the culmination of all those things, and please stop me if I'm just like, it kind of feels like verbal diarrhea
Oh no, I'm
right
loving
now.
it. I'm
But
loving it.
yeah, like it just got to a point where I was just like, why am I doing this for? Like, I have mounting student loan debt. I'm perpetually frustrated because it's like I just feel like I keep hitting a wall, hitting a wall, hitting a wall. And so when and I think maybe that's why, for me, it was like a breath of fresh air having the opportunity to work with PJ. It was like something so different from what I had been doing, such a break from the routine. And I was just like, whoa, what is this? And so then when I did get in touch with Adam, like I finally connected with Adam Blackstone, and going on that Kanye tour, I didn't even know what tours paid. No clue. None. And so after that experience, I was just like, literally, I was like, I'm doing this wrong. Literally, I'm doing it
You
wrong.
cashed that first check and something made sense.
I mean, the direct deposit hit, and I'm like, what? Are you serious right now?
Yeah.
I mean, like I was traveling on someone else's dime. Like I honestly, like I hadn't seen the world like that before,
And you were
ever.
doing all that with your violin.
All of that with my violin. And and even with that, like I, coming back like at the end of tour, like I was able to like get us a website, get a web designer, do a whole full on photo, you know what I mean? So it was like, this is allowing me to like fund projects that I'm really passionate about. And I mean, so I think that started as I got more and more opportunities to tour and to collaborate with various artists and build relationships with various labels and music directors. I think it definitely changed the course of my career because it changed my perspective for me. Because I mean, I love music, Garrett. I love classical music. There's no two ways about that. But I also really value the ability to pay my bills. I
Amen.
appreciate, you know, being in a space where I am valued. Like my artistic input is valued. My voice is valued. Um the way that I play is valued.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was new. I didn't feel that in the classical space in the same way. I just didn't. Um and
So wrapping that concept
yeah.
around to the idea of, the work, especially these days, we have all of these organizations and their new DEI initiatives and all these awakenings they've been coming to. What do you see as the most authentic and organic way for more musicians that look like us to, get this new perspective that you've had? It's like someone grabbed your hand and pulled you into this new world. How can we make
Yeah.
that more of a ubiquitous experience for Black musicians who happen to play, these classical instruments?
The decision makers have to be more diverse. I mean, simply put,
Mm,
show me your boardroom, show me your board of directors. Show me the people who are making the decisions on behalf of your organization, because if they're all white, we're probably not gonna, you know, things are not gonna change
right.
in the way, in the time frame that they really should and need to change. Um, it's really that simple. I don't, I think human beings are kind of change averse in general. Um, some more than others, but that has to change. We've been talking about it and screaming from the rafters, like, please change, please change. And then COVID-19 hits and shuts everyone down,
Right.
which has leveled the workspace in a way that is unprecedented. It
And
has
when
not, we've not seen it like this
and what do
before.
you mean by that level the workspace?
What I mean is freelancers are out of work and the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra is out of work. So
That's
who's better
yeah.
than who?
Yep. There we go.
You
And
get
here
what I'm
we are.
saying?
Yeah.
And here
Yeah.
we are. So
Who's more
let's
dynamic? Who's more marketable?
who's
Who
more
can
versatile,
who's more
who's more
prepared?
marketable,
Yeah.
who's better equipped to remote record and work from home.
Mhm. Mhm.
If your day to day exists like in going to a dedicated rehearsal space and going to a dedicated concert space and having a schedule carved out for you, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying this is where we are. So I think people have really had to assess differently. Think different things are valued. When we look at like essential workers, for instance, right?
Mhm.
What was all important prior to isn't so important anymore.
Right,
People
right.
aren't looking at social media influencers. No one wants to hear from you right now.
I
You
didn't
get what
want
I'm
to
saying?
before, but yeah.
Correct. So it's shifted in a way that we have not seen before. And yeah, I think that, you know, coming back to your initial question, I think that the decision makers have to be more diverse, because there have to be different voices and different perspectives in those rooms.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
has to be. I mean, to think that you are just so, so even for me to think that I'm just so progressive to be able to like step outside of myself and see things from someone else's lived experience is impossible. I can't, right? I live and breathe and exist as Stephanie Matthews, as a Black woman, all of my personal and professional identifiers. But that's, I think, what would make um, the orchestras more dynamic. I think it would make programming more dynamic, because honestly, people are tired. People are tired of the same stale programming. People are tired of the same stale looking billboards. I mean, frankly speaking, I'm tired and
Yeah.
I love it. I love classical music, and this notion that, oh, well, people are just not paying what they used to. Your concert halls are empty because your programming sucks.
Right.
People are
Exactly.
not in your concert hall because, your orchestra is not relevant to
And
the in most times to the communities that they exist within.
yeah, and I think that's an even more accurate way because music is a subjective sort of thing, but that relevance, that real impact is what so many of these organizations are
Cultural
missing.
relevance. And you know
Yes,
what? We would not be having all of these, extensive and boring, frankly, DEI conversations and diversity and inclusion initiatives if their bottom line wasn't being affected. If they were still bringing in the money that they were enjoying, this wouldn't be a conversation, because there would be no need for them to change anything
right,
that they've been doing.
right. Wow. Well, as we wrap up here, someone listening right now has a little black girl that they want to get involved in violin. Maybe there's a teacher out there that's teaching these young kids from the more marginalized communities and trying to get expose them to this art form, so-called classical or otherwise. What are your
Mhm.
words for them? What advice do you have for folks helping these very young musicians start their journey?
I think it's important to be very, very careful about languaging when it comes to dealing with young people, because they are the future, right? They represent where we're headed. And if we can empower them and support and uplift and encourage them, I mean, hopefully we will be in a much better, much stronger position than we are today. You know, talent knows no demographic. I mean, success is not limited by, the socioeconomic constructs that we think of.
Hmm.
Opportunity is key, right? And if we can empower a young mind to really truly believe that they can do whatever they set their mind to with the diligence and the passion and instilling the work ethic, I mean, we would just have a much richer tapestry. And I think we'd be much prouder of ourselves as a country.
And maybe they wouldn't have to, struggle the way that you and I had to in school on our last $10, as you said earlier.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't necessarily think that struggle is bad. Be, it's like, what is the struggle,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
And what's learned from it.
yes, like, because you absolutely, you're not going to learn from your comfort zone, okay? So I think it is important for us to be stretched in a way that allows us to grow, allows us to develop, allows us to learn. But, you know, to continue to banish, you know, certain groups of people to obscurity is just it's irresponsible. I mean, and we can't, I mean, I don't think we can't stand for it any longer. We all have something to contribute. And it's, I think of this like the Crayola box, right? No
Mhm.
one's going to the store to buy, you know, the four pack that you get for free at the restaurants,
Right.
right?
Right.
You want the big jumbo box. Why? Because you have more colors at your disposal to create something really beautiful and dynamic. It's like a toolkit, right? The more tools in the toolkit, the better able you are to build, the better able you are to construct something. So I think with that in mind, I would love to instill into that little girl or that little boy that dreams do come true. um I think it is really, really important to identify people who really support you and love you and want to push you to be better. Um, because there's a world of opportunity, a
And
world of opportunity, and we need you. We need the next generation to step up.
And back to that point of, not being able to learn and grow in your comfort zone, that certainly applies to music. Many of my lessons were not comfortable, but I grew
Oh,
from them. As
100%.
but then also, in the conversations of racial equity that we're having right now, white people stepping outside of that comfort zone, men stepping outside of their comfort zone when it comes to the intersection of race and sex, and
Yeah.
the unique challenges of Black women. I think that's a really good point to end on there. Stepping outside of that comfort zone so you can learn and grow. For folks who want to learn more about you, about the work you do, maybe even book you, how can they get in contact?
Well, my you can reach me on my website at www.stringcandy.com. I'm also on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Steph on Strings, which is StepHonStrings. I'm also on there as String Candy Music, which is at just String Candy Music on Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook, Stephanie Matthews, or String Candy on Facebook. Um, I really do love engaging with audience, with artists, with students. So please feel free to drop a line, a message. Um, and if you want to contact me directly, you can contact me for booking directly through the website.
I think when we get off the line here, I'm gonna sit in front of my TV and watch your performance with Mary J. Blige, so I can sing "I'm Going Down" as I watch you play the violin.
Oh, God.
Stephanie, it's really been such a pleasure. Thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me, Garrett. I really, really appreciate talking to you anytime.